Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Natural Female Muscle Podcast. This week, for episode 35, we are joined by Abi Kerr. Abi is a natural figure athlete and works as an occupational therapist in the NHS. For those who don't know, Abi is the reigning UK and international figure champ, a title she attained in her first season last year. This season also came with other incredible achievements, including the PCA Midlands tone figure title and overall title, followed by a second place at the PCA Finals that year and a top 3 placing at the INBA Universe. However, it's important to note that this was not the start of Abi's journey with bodybuilding or training in general, as Abi had been an athlete in a different capacity from a young age. And this is something that I'm really looking forward to discussing today so that we can see all of those factors that led to Abi's successful first season in competitive bodybuilding at 29 years of age. So very excited to get into this today. Abi, thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, no worries at all. Thank you so much for that introduction.
You are very welcome. And like I said there, I'm really excited for this conversation to kind of hear more of what's gone into what that last season looked like, because it's so easy, especially when somebody has a lot of success in their first season, to think that like that's the first year that they've just started any form of training or whatever it is, and it seems like it comes straight off the bat, but often there's so much more that's kind of gone into it. And that was like really kind of inspiring for me when I remember seeing you win at the Southern. I was like, oh my God, like where has this girl with massive delts come from? I need to know. I need to know what's going on. So yeah, it'll be really, really exciting to talk about that today.
Yeah, definitely. I'm excited.
No, it'd be good. So I think that the best place to kind of always start with is what your like first ever kind of like introduction to any form of like training or competition was like for you, because I know that started for you long before bodybuilding even came into the picture. So what was kind of your first ever experience with sport and with competition like?
Yeah, so I've always been very sporty, like doing all the sports like in primary school, swimming, gymnastics, horse riding, tennis, everything.
Mm.
And then it was swimming that I was all right at. So then in kind of year 7, I stopped all the out of school sports and really focused on swimming. And I was swimming like 7, 8 times a week.
Yeah.
And I started competing probably, maybe year I was doing like little competitions, but then I started like doing nationals, British champs from about age 13. And I did all that up to age 16. And when I did my final nationals and I came fourth, and I medaled at nationals a few times, but the final one I came fourth and just wasn't quite up to that standard to go to the next level, like to get to like Europeans and things.
Yeah.
And obviously it's a big sacrifice, like 8 times a week, like before school I was training, after school, like it was intense. But I mean, I say I love the competitions. Like, I absolutely love competing in swimming, but the training. My parents would say like, I don't think you ever truly loved it. Yeah, like I am about the gym. Like I'm so passionate about going to the gym,
Yeah.
training, but like I never had that as such. But I did about the competing side of things, but never so much about the training. But yeah, I did all sports, to be honest. Like in school, I did every sport, even if I wasn't that good at it. The
Mm.
PE teachers would know that I would be up for it. So like, come on, Abby, you're going to do cross country. I was like, yeah, sure. I wasn't particularly good at it, but I did it. Um, and when I quit at the end of GCSEs, I was still doing like school sports and netball. And I remember joining a Harriers club, and I was doing like a long run a week in sixth form, which I couldn't imagine doing that now. Yeah. Um, so I've had quite a bit of history of competing in sports as a youngster. And then, do you want me to talk about when I got to uni? I mean,
Yeah, definitely. I think like it's interesting how you obviously did so much sport growing up. I mean, some people either do or don't, and they either kind of love competition or hate it. But do you think that like having so many different interests, and also kind of even with the fact that, like you say, you didn't love swimming in the way that maybe you love training, like it's very different. But do you think that kind of like instilled like quite a strong work ethic in you.
Oh yeah.
Age, especially with like something that you don't like. So it's all, well, not that you don't like it, but it's not
Yeah.
the same, because then it's like in comparison, going and doing a training session that you actually really love is like nothing in comparison to having to train, like get up super early every morning before school and going in the swimming pool for like an hour or so.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I never enjoyed getting up at like 5 a.m. to go and train before school, really. Um, but it definitely I think it made it easier getting up like in this prep, like for cardio, because I was like, oh, I'm only getting up at 6:30. I was like, it's fine. And like, I'm only doing 40 minutes on the stairs. Whereas like before I was doing, you're doing cardio for like an hour and a half in the swimming pool. Like, it's a lot. Like, I don't really know. Like, if I get in a pool now, I can do like 4 lengths and I'm like shattered. But yeah, I think my parents definitely kind of instilled, working hard for it, and they tried to encourage me to work as hard as I could in training, and I did, but just looking back now, I'm like, I was never that passionate about the training side of things.
Yeah, and you've definitely got to be in order for you to like excel in anything, and that's like
Exactly.
the same thing with bodybuilding as well, isn't it? So like you were saying, then you obviously moved away from school, went to uni, went to Sheffield Uni, which is actually where I went as well. So
Oh, really? I was at
yeah.
Sheffield Hallam.
Okay, well, still Sheffield.
Rivals.
It's the same
Yeah.
thing. What was that kind of like transition like for you then? Because especially like as anyone who does a lot of sports at school or whatever it may be, or even just anyone going to uni, sometimes you don't know where you want to take things. So did you actually get involved in sports when you were at uni as well? Like, how did that transition from there?
I remember I went to like rowing trials and netball trials in like the first few weeks, but I didn't continue with it. So I didn't really do any sport in first year of uni at all. I just kind of enjoyed the uni life, going out quite a lot and stuff. And I think I kind of wish I had done sports now. Like, I would have loved it, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But when did I start going to the gym? I started doing classes, like LBT, and it was called Bang Tidy, and it was like an upper body circuit class. So we started going, I think, at the end of like second year into third year, just for a bit of fun, really. But yeah, I think it was Nathan. Do you know Nathan Brumley of Trains?
Yeah, I do know Nathan.
He was teaching those classes, and I remember him saying, you get free PT classes, with your uni gym membership. And I was like, oh, that's cool. He was like, I think you should do it. And he kind of introduced me to lifting weights at the end of like my final year of uni. So I kind of like learned all my initial, how to lift weights and stuff. Maybe not super optimally looking back, but yeah, that's how I got introduced to actually training.
Oh wow, that's so interesting. I didn't know that you knew Nathan. He's a he's a very outgoing character as well. And I know he does a great job with things like that as well. But it's like, it's so interesting how like that first kind of introduction to training can come from like the most like random places of someone just saying, just give it a go and like see how you kind of get on from there. Did you feel like that was kind of what you like needed at that point, after almost like having like not necessarily full time off like sports or exercise, but you had like all of like first or second year kind of away from it? Did you feel like you were missing that thing that you ultimately like really enjoyed doing?
Yeah, because I think those classes, I could see how competitive I was. Like, I was trying to lift the heaviest weights in the room out of everybody, and like if I saw like Nathan grabbing like the heavy weights, I'd go and grab the same weights. I'd be like, I can do what he's doing. Probably couldn't. So I knew I always had that like competitive kind of want to be stronger than before, or better than before. So I think he probably saw that in me and was like, right, come on, because the weights only go up to so much in those classes, don't they? So yeah.
How did that then end up like transitioning into you just starting to train on your own? Because I feel like when you've obviously been training for such a long time, like you're so used to just going into the gym, training, doing your sessions, but when you obviously don't know like very much and you're not really sure where you're taking it, it's like hard to know kind of like where to start. And sometimes that's a bit of a transition. So I know you mentioned you started with those kind of like PT sessions. Did that just naturally transition into you kind of developing like a routine with training as a whole?
Yeah, I guess I just kind of had an awareness of roughly how to train. I mean, looking back, I used to do so much volume and I was in the gym far too long.
Yeah.
So yeah, after uni, obviously, I was like training on my own at Virgin Active. And I do remember one of the PTs there was like, you train for far too long, and then asking about my diet. And I like wasn't fueling myself properly. I didn't have a clue really. I think I was still in that, that diet culture. Like I remember putting courgette in my oats and, trying to reduce all my carb intake, whereas now I'm like all the carbs. So yeah, I'm trying to think who I train. If I train with a few friends and stuff, but then it was when I moved moved back to Leeds and I went to UltraFlex Leeds that I met like more bodybuilding people.
Yeah, and that was kind of like more of the like introduction that made you think more about bodybuilding as opposed to just kind of training for the sake of training kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. I remember the first time I went, I think it was one of the first time, it was recently opened and Charlie was there training.
Yeah.
And he was training with like Mike and John, they train very hard and big guys.
Yeah.
And Charlie was like, oh, so how did you hear about this gym? Obviously wanting to know like about marketing because it's a relatively new gym. And I told him, oh, Instagram. And then I was like, oh, do you come here often? And he was like, oh, I own the gym. I was like, oh, sorry about that, Charlie. That was a bit embarrassing. But I met there was a few girls competing. Natasha was one of them. I think she was prepping. And I went to a couple of my friends' shows who was doing like PCA bikini. So I was just slowly getting more introduced into the bodybuilding world. Like, obviously thought I would never be able to do that sort of thing. Like, literally, I remember going to the shows and seeing the figure girls and putting like a story on, like thinking absolute goals, like no chance I could ever do that.
Yeah.
Like, it just seemed so far away from what I could. Yeah, I knew I had to build a lot more muscle and be in the right place to be able to prep and get that shredded, because obviously it takes a lot of commitment.
Yeah, definitely. Was that like a point where you were then like kind of coming out of uni and trying to kind of find your like feet in like life in general as well? So it like wasn't really the time for you to be like super focused on bodybuilding.
Yeah, because I guess I'd started I was doing my first role as an occupational therapist, and I mean, saying that, some areas of where I've worked would have probably suited being on a prep, like for example where I am now. But if you're in like an inpatient hospital and you're a new starter there, like that's going to be difficult to balance both of them, definitely.
So did your like training at that point, I'm assuming it looked very different to how it maybe looks now, because you were pretty much doing like all of it on your own. You didn't have a coach at this point or anything like that either, right? So how did you, as like in general, how did you approach your training, and what were you also doing with your nutrition too? Because like you say, you knew you needed to grow if that was maybe in the distant future, like a goal to get on stage. So like, what did you actually decide to do on like your own bat on that front?
So training wise, I was probably training, 5 to 6 times a week. I was doing a lot of volume, a lot of drop sets. Just generally stuff that I definitely couldn't recover from now. But I think maybe initially I wasn't super accurate with my training, so you kind of obviously develop that as you go, don't you? But my nutrition, I knew I needed to eat a bit more, and my nutrition's, I've always known like getting enough protein in, but I've very much got a sweet tooth, so I'd have a lot of, get my carbs in via pick a mix or something like that. So I didn't have a great awareness of nutrition at that point, just about eating enough protein. And I did know that I needed to eat in a surplus, obviously. And I was eating in a surplus at that point. But I wasn't putting on I'm trying to think. Because I wasn't eating enough when I first came out of uni, and then I put on a bit of size after that. And then I probably like maintained for quite a while at like, yeah. But I'm trying to think when I actually learned more about nutrition. I think honestly it was when I joined Dan really that I learned a bit more about the importance of, whole foods. And I was eating whole foods, but
no, I know what you mean, but I think it actually stands as a really good example that like for the most part in like your bodybuilding journey, like especially if you're like not sure like when you want to step on stage, or if you don't want to be taking everything like so intensely, you can still kind of just like train hard, make sure you've got a surplus there,
Yeah.
and you will make progress. Like it's not as complicated as a lot of people like to think that it is. And often a lot of the time it is literally just time doing those things that's going to make the progress add up, which I think definitely in your case shows quite a lot, because that's kind of one of the main things that contributed to a lot of your
Yeah.
progress, right?
Yeah, because I've like definitely not been optimal like at all. But like you say, I've done the general gist of being in a surplus, eating enough protein and training hard and trying to get stronger over time. And I've built a okay amount of muscle.
Oh yeah,
But
just all right.
a little bit, but
But you did go to, because you mentioned to me you went to that posing seminar with Emma Hindman
oh
in
yeah.
2019. Was that when you'd obviously started to think like, okay, I'm maybe considering competing. I should start to kind of like have a go. What was that whole experience like for you? Because I know so many other girls and competitors will be in that position where they, think, okay, I'm going to, meet some other athletes. I'm going to go to these experiences, and it can be quite scary. So what was that day like for you?
Yeah, because I think 2019 must have been when I started going to the shows, watching a few of my friends competing.
Yeah.
And yeah, Emma was putting on some posing sessions at UltraFlex, and I went along, and there was like, I think Phoebe Goodwin was there when she was doing figure, and there was a few other like very, very large, like hench people there. And obviously posing is hard. Like I didn't realize. And like looking back at some like photos, videos, I'm like, I mean, I would say that still needs work now, but it took a long time. And I knew after that session, I was like, right, this isn't going to be a quick thing. Like, I'm not going to suddenly be able to learn posing in a few lessons. Like, it's going to take consistent practice. So, yeah, so then I took 4 years to practice and then finally stepped on stage.
It's good though that you kind of like recognize that and you weren't in a massive rush, because I think that a lot of people like go to those events, or they decide like I'm going to get on stage now this year because it's like now or never sort of thing.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with kind of like actually taking like a little bit of time and not feeling like there has to be such a rush, because everyone says it, but like the stage is always there. And I think that when you enjoy just training, you're quite happy just waiting until the time comes around when all the kind of like pieces of the puzzle just kind
Yeah.
of fall into place.
Yeah, because after the 2019, after all the posing and going to the shows and stuff, I knew I was going traveling. So I went away for 3 months, and I trained a little bit when I was away when I was in Australia, when it was a bit easier to train. But I came back and I'd gained quite a lot. Well, I've gained about 8 pounds or something like that. So then I took a good few months trying to kind of just slowly come down from that. But then it was like COVID, wasn't it? So then I couldn't train properly. I had like a few dumbbells up to maybe 10 kilos. So I just did bicep curls and lateral raises for a few months. So I guess it was never really the time in 2020 to do that because of traveling and then COVID. And then I moved to London within COVID in 2020.
Okay.
Well, it was actually amazing because it was so quiet in London. So I got to do all the like tourist stuff of like nobody around. Buckingham Palace was like just me on my bike, like with my friends, because I moved down with a couple of friends. But again, then that was like never the right time to compete or prep, because I was like, well, I've just moved to London. I want to be exploring, like all the restaurants are just opened again and stuff. So it really is. It took me a long time to think, right, I feel like I'm in a good place. I can actually commit now to this.
And I bet you're probably quite happy that you did give yourself that time as well.
Yeah, definitely. And because I think when I joined Dan, it was in January last year, yeah.
Okay.
And he kind of he was like mapping out my kind of show, saying, well, why don't we aim for the end of the season or near the end of the season, and then if you get to finals, we can not having to wait around for ages. So we did like an off season for like January, February, March, April, May, like 5 months, where I was really, I mean, like I said, I've always trained, but it was like my diet wasn't amazing. So that was when it started getting actually serious.
Yeah, I think we'll obviously come on to like the changes that came into play when you started with Dan, but when it also came to actually deciding to work with Dan, was that something that you'd always like kind of like known that Dan was someone that you wanted to reach out to? Because like you said, you'd kind of been around people like Natasha, who I believe had previously been coached by Dan. And
Yeah.
was he always somebody that you like had your eye on? And like, how did you decide that he was the person you wanted to work with?
Well, it literally was when I used to train with Natasha occasionally, and Natasha obviously was very complimentary about Dan, and she was like, "I'm messaging Dan about you." She was like, "You got huge lats, and you're not even like trying that hard." She was like, "I'm messaging him. You need to be coached by him." And he'd like message me saying, I don't know what he'd message me first, but I'd put like a gym video of me doing something up on Instagram, and he'd just reply saying TikTok, TikTok. So it's kind of like was always in the back of my head. Like I was like, oh well, Dan's keen to work with me. So, and obviously his results, like he does,
Yeah,
all of his girls do very well. So
nails it.
I did just message him when I was ready to have a coach. I was like, hello, do you have a room for me? And he did, thankfully.
Of course. No, well, like he's got such a great like track record, which like I think, whenever you're obviously starting with a coach, it's like results, but then also if you kind of like know them, and particularly if you have like a friend or somebody who has worked with that person, like that's often the best thing that you can do, because they're not going to lie to you. Like I think sometimes when you like look on social media and stuff, you never really know what a coach is like, but when you can actually speak to somebody who has worked with them for X amount of time, you have such a good idea of like what that process is going to be like. So you obviously started with Dan. You got the plan to have a little bit of an off-season phase first. What were the biggest things that then changed? Because like you say, nutrition probably changed, but training, I'm assuming, also took some changes. So what were the changes that kind of came into play once you started up that process?
So nutrition wise, like Dan works off a meal plan and then like free calories. So he obviously immediately put me on a meal plan. So I was having a lot more meals a day than I was before. So he had me on like was it 5 meals and then like pre and a post.
Yes.
So that took some adjustment to like prepping all those meals and just eating that much. Because I think I just made up my calories with not so nutrient dense food. So so that was really good. And then obviously I got the free calories, so I could have a little bit of something if I wanted, which was good. Training wise, because I was just training legs once a week, so I've just always preferred training upper body. And he increased my training of legs to twice a week, which was also took some adjustment. Like the volume that I just couldn't tolerate the volume initially for ages. Like I was getting DOMs for like 4 days.
Yeah.
Because I think my legs just weren't used to being like hit that much. Or he definitely increased the volume. That was as in like frequency that was training legs in a week, but also the volume within each session as well.
Did you adapt that over time, or did you guys actually end up titrating that down at all?
Yeah, well, we reduced it a little bit. And I had to reduce it a bit because I wasn't recovered enough for the next session.
No.
And then in terms of training out, I was doing with Dan, he put me on push pull legs, rest, upper lower rest.
Right.
So so I was then consistently training 5 times a week, whereas before I was flexible with 4 to 5. So yeah.
So like you had that consistent setup, but like you say, like had to make those adjustments, because the thing is like if you're also getting stronger, or it's like you kind of alluded to earlier, it always with the volume, it's like accuracy of training and then also strength relative. So like the lower the accuracy and the lower your strength, the higher volume you can tolerate.
Exactly. I think that's what I was doing before. Yeah. That's why I could tolerate so much before. But then now I'm actually really conscious of using the correct muscle for these exercises. So then obviously it's a lot harder.
I'm assuming it obviously really helped you to like have that time with Dan as well before you actually started your prep, because especially like you say, you were having to get used to the new setup with food, the new setup with training, adapting to that too. Particularly I'm assuming like with your job as well, and this is something that I always see with anyone who, like, let's be honest, doesn't just like work from home, is that, if you've got to eat 4, 5, maybe 6 times a day, like it can take a bit of time to adapt to, and not having that stressor during a prep is helpful, so you can kind of get used to it before it starts. So was that something that was really helpful to just like set in place the routine before the prep actually started for you as well?
Yeah, it definitely took some time to adjust to having those extra meals within the day. But I think, like you say, having those few months to kind of practice it almost, so that when it came to prep, it was just kind of easy enough, second nature, just to have those meals within my working day. Because Dan, he upped my calories like he was not every week, but it felt like quite often he was upping them and upping them, trying to get them as high as possible before we started the cut. And by the end of it, I was so ready to diet down, because I was just, coming to the end of the day just so bloated and just felt awful at myself. I was like, we're ready to diet now, like you've really fed me here.
It's a nice place to be in though, because you'd rather be like ready to go than like still being like really hungry or just like not feeling like you're ready to basically have like a big diet phase ahead of you.
It's definitely a good telltale sign, isn't it, that you're ready to diet?
Absolutely. But like at the same time, you obviously must have had like body comp in a pretty good place still at that point, because you mentioned to me that you actually lost like 8 kilos across your prep as a whole. So that's like 18 pounds, which is like honestly a really nice amount of body weight to come down, because it's not but not kind of like too much. Was that something that you intentionally did to manage body composition, or was it just kind of like naturally where you were sitting at that point?
Yeah, to be honest, I remember I was weighing like 66 kilos, like coming to the end of the building phase, like just consistently, even though it was up in the food. So I think my body just kind of didn't want to go too much more than that, really. And then I did stop weighing myself though as I was coming down. I weighed myself to a point, and then because my body was just doing all sorts, really, like it was having like ghost periods, and then I'd hold loads of water, and then my weight would go back up, and I'd get stressed out by it. So he was like, right, stop. So I stopped weighing myself probably about 4 weeks out the first competition, but then I did weigh myself kind of in between, I think just before finals, and that's when it was like 8 kilos down.
Were you mainly just like looking at visuals at that point instead, as opposed to kind of like looking too much at the scale weight?
Yeah, Dan was just like, we'll just go off the look, it's fine. Like, I'd rather not stress you out. And I was like, yeah, that's fine.
It's definitely important to like manage those things. I think especially when you were probably also like pretty much like not far off being ready at that point, then you can definitely just like look at the look, because at the end of the day, that's like the most
important. More important, isn't it? Yeah.
I think so many people forget that in prep or in bodybuilding in general, is that like your body weight or your scale weight it's just a piece of data that like you're using to just see where things are moving, but it's not everything. Like, it's not, if your scale weight goes up, your scale weight goes down, it doesn't mean that something's drastically changed. And if it's actually helpful for you to kind of come detached from that for a little bit, it definitely does help massively.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I didn't weigh myself like after as well for a while. He was like, you don't have to take your weight now, because sometimes it just, I mean, I never had an issue with my weight before, but I guess that's what prep kind of, because in your head you're expecting it to go down, and then you want it to slowly go back up, but not like. So I think it's important that your coach can kind of just have a look at you, and obviously it's a good general indicator, isn't it, the weight side of things, but it's not everything.
No, it's not. And it has to definitely be like managed on a person by person basis to like keep it in like the healthiest spot physically, but also like mentally as well, because that's obviously super important. I'll definitely come on to kind of like that post show phase in a little bit as well. But I did also want to ask you, like, with the fact that, in your prep, as I said, you came down like sort of 18 pounds across, what was it, kind of like 19 weeks, I think it was, that you had to your first show. That's obviously a really, really nice kind of rate of loss to have, because it's almost like a pound a week at most, but that was obviously up to the very back end as well. So with having like a rate of loss that was almost so kind of well managed, and you didn't have to come down so much, in comparison to having to come down like 35 pounds in a prep, did you feel like that like made the prep feel easier at any point? Obviously it's never easy, but in the sense that you didn't have to maybe push quite as aggressively, or did you actually feel any positives, like benefits of that? I know you just mentioned that you had some high stress and some ghost periods and things like that as well, but did you ultimately feel any kind of benefits of that at all?
Yeah, I guess, well, because he'd never done like a diet with me, we didn't know as such kind of how much weight we were going to lose. Like he was kind of saying like I can estimate, but it's like
You never know.
you never know, do you, from looking at someone. So I mean, I felt like the food was dropped initially quite a bit, and like cardio straight in at 40 minutes a day, but it did never go above 40 minutes in the morning. And food was manageable, to be honest. My steps were at about, so he does like high low days. So on like on low days where the food's a bit lower, I had 15k steps and 40 minutes cardio in the morning.
Yeah.
And then on high days, you'd have 10k steps, no cardio, a little bit more food. So I would never do extended periods of the low days. I mean, maybe we'll do like 5 days in a row, say, and then have like 2 days of higher. Well, it wasn't particularly high food, but there's a bit of a mental break. You're like, oh yeah, I get some dark chocolate today or something.
Did you actually run that throughout the whole prep as well, with like the high and low days? Was that implemented from the very start? Yeah.
Maybe not the high. Yeah, no, it was pretty much from the beginning. Yeah.
Did you set that up? Sorry to ask, but I'm obviously just interested. Did you set that up with like the high days or the low days on like training days or rest days, or was it just like different days across the week? Yeah.
Yeah, it's just any. And he would kind of plan it in the check-ins, like, right, you're going to run low days for 5 days now, and then you're going to have your high days on the weekend, even without looking at me before the weekend. Like, I think it helped mentally, definitely, to get to manage it. But I mean, obviously it was still a struggle with like energy in the middle to the end part. Like,
yeah, of course.
Yeah. And my food probably was quite low to like a normal person, but it did feel manageable, to be honest. Rest days were hard, actually. Rest days were quite low. But the training days, I didn't mind.
Yeah. And I think just like you said, like having the high days, even when they did come in, because you knew that at some point they would come through, like the psychological benefit of that is like massive. And I have also like seen a huge benefit of that, especially in females who are generally more stress prone than males as well. It helps so much, because even on those days when you're digging really hard and you feel really tired, there is a relief. Like, that it's not just like constant low forever, and you're just kind of like hoping for something to kind of help you there. That at some point, like the low days are worth it, because that at some point you will get a bit of a break from that. And I think it does definitely help psychologically through the process.
Yeah, I agree. I really like that approach, to be honest.
Yeah. Did you find that you were able to obviously like map this out quite well around work as well? Because ultimately when you've got 15,000 steps, 40 minutes of cardio, maybe a training session as well, it can be very daunting. I know you kind of like adapt to it as the process goes along, because it doesn't just go from like 0 to like 100. It kind of takes its time to kind of build up to that. But how did you find fitting that in around like a standard day of work? Because I think that for a lot of people, they'll think, how am I ever going to kind of fit this into my day?
Yeah, so my job that I'm in is in the community, like in an urgent service. So, but we are quite flexible I can start from home, like do my meeting from home, and then I'll be walking between patients' houses in the community. The one thing actually, when I joined Dan, he was like, you need to bring your steps down, because my average steps were kind of like 13k at the time. And I was also cycling as well, like quite a bit, just because it's easier to cycle around. And he was like, you're dropping weight because you're doing too much, like please stop. And I kind of managed to get it down to like 10k and take a few more buses at work. But naturally I was doing 13k before I started with Dan. So 15k steps wasn't actually too much of a push for me at work at all, because I just walk between all my patients' visits instead of getting public transport. Like, albeit by the end, very slow walk, like plodding along with my bag, like, oh.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I walk to the gym, which is like 10 minutes away, do my cardio, walk back, and then have a shower, and then do the meeting. So it kind of worked quite well with my job. Then I'd head off for my visits and walk between them. And by the time I was back, I'd almost done my steps, and then I'd just train. And I was quite lucky that I think my job does lend quite nicely to especially the steps side of things, and obviously managing the cardio and the training, being able to start and finish from home does help.
Yeah, definitely, because it It does play a role. I think that no matter what, you can always find a way to make something work if you need to. But, having a job that does ultimately like accommodate for things like that, it does make a huge difference because it brings the stress down. And I think, like you even just said there, you'd finish work and then you'd go and do training, and then it's like cardio steps are all done and like everything's finished, and you're not having to like go out and
Late night walk, yeah.
go out and do steps super late and things like that. Which, like, again, like I say, it's always doable even in a different job, because you might just have to wake up earlier and get it done.
Yeah.
But it does definitely make things easier. And that also just comes exactly into, like you were saying, with making sure life was in a good spot for bodybuilding, because if you have a job where like things like that are just not possible, then it's okay to kind of admit that this is maybe not the best time to do a bodybuilding prep, and maybe like wait until you're in a better spot to be able to do it. Because the last thing that you want is like more stress on top of something that, like, let's be honest, is like a prep, it comes with its stresses in itself. So you don't want to be kind of like adding more stresses on top of that, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was going to say, when I worked in a hospital briefly, I was thinking, this was like after I'd kind of started training, I was like, I feel like it would have been just very difficult, like you say.
Yeah.
And like I listened to a podcast with, I think yours with, was it Yaz? And she's like, is she in the NHS? She like works long hours within a hospital or something, or one of them, somebody does. And I just think fair play, because that is difficult. You've got to really, have commitment to the cause.
Yeah, you've got to really want it, because it's not easy. But kind of like she showed there, it's like when there's a will, there's a way. Even if it's not fun, there is definitely a way of doing it. But of course, like coming through that prep and coming to the time where you actually did your first shows, which your first show was the UK DFBA Southern, right?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you came around to that first peak week, what was the process like for you in terms of the actual peak week itself, in the way that you guys managed that peak as you came into that show?
Well, that peak, obviously my first peak, we dropped cardio out a week out of the show. We were doing daily check-ins, and he was kind of telling me on that day whether it'd be a low day or a high day. And I think we just went low for the first part of the week, and then high for the back end, and then maybe the day before like a bit more of a extra high day, a few extras. But I probably wasn't like, well, I wasn't as lean as I was maybe by the end, so I didn't need to have like tons and tons of high days going into it, but I did get a couple.
But not like too many manipulations, which I think,
no,
especially when you're in like your like first shows of the season, or when you're also not like super 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 lean, your body doesn't need very much to be, because you're pretty much just where you need to be on the day to day anyway. So it's just those kind of small changes that can kind of guide you in. And did that help you a lot from, like, I suppose, a confidence aspect as well, kind of going into that
it's
show?
like stress free, isn't it? Like, we're not changing so much, so it's like my look's not going to change like drastically at all. Like I see crazy like manipulations some people make for their shows, and I'm like, that doesn't seem necessary. But maybe if you're like top bodybuilder, but for someone like me, no, I didn't need any of that. Like I see people dropping like water and stuff like that. Like, I have slightly less water, but I'm still having probably a good, I don't know, a litre before I go on. Like, I'm still having a lot. Just not as much as normal. That was the only manipulation I can really think that we made.
No, definitely. Like me and AJ talk about this all the time, and it's kind of like the more muscularity and the leaner you are, there's obviously more manipulations you can make, those kind of final percentages. But even at those levels, it's like you really want to have the most predictable outcome that you can have, because you're playing with like very, very fine margins. So it's like you're maybe like, when people are like cutting water drastically, they're doing like all these things maybe to get 1% or 2% extra out of their look, but at the potential risk of losing like 20 or 30%, so it's like you're risking so much, but also potentially putting the athlete in a very stressed state, which, like, when we're at that point where we are so lean, no matter how chill we think we are, you know, we're still at like higher stress levels. So you're so susceptible to like anything that's different when you've been doing the same thing for like 19 weeks or 20 weeks plus. You know, your body definitely feels that. But I'm glad that that was obviously like a relatively stress-free process for you into that first show. And was it a day that you enjoyed? Because I know realistically it was a long time coming, you know, like you've been thinking
Yeah.
for a long
And
time. So
I remember going into the theatre
mm.
and it was absolutely packed. It was so busy and I almost started crying. I was like, I can't get on that stage. I literally, my friend was like, don't ruin your makeup, don't ruin your makeup. I was like, I can't get up there, I can't get up there.
Oh
Like, it was just
no.
very overwhelming. But then actually, luckily for that show, I couldn't see anybody. All I could see, all had these bright lights. I could see the judges, but I couldn't see anybody in the audience. So obviously I could hear people, but I didn't know. I just tried to imagine. I was like, nobody's watching you. It's fine. Just have a great time.
Yeah.
And I was really nervous going in, but everyone backstage at UKDFA was so nice. They were like, you're going to be fine. And then once I was on stage, because I couldn't see everyone, I was actually fine.
Yeah.
And I loved it.
Was that actually your first time at a UKDFBA show as well? Because I know
it was.
Okay, amazing.
Yeah, I've been to loads of PCA ones, but I'd never been to a UKDFBA one. I think I'd watched a few like live streams of it or like, because I think you guys had like posted some and I've seen, so I kind of roughly knew how they did it, but yeah.
Were you obviously happy with the outcome on that show day? Was that at any point like a bit of a shock for you, or were you like actually?
Yeah. No, I was so shocked. You should have seen me when I came out. I was like, what has just happened? Because I thought like the girls all looked like amazing. So I was like, oh, everyone looks so good. Like, I'm just gonna enjoy it. Like, I'm fine. I've made it. Like, just enjoy it. But I was so shocked. I think that was shocked. I was still like, even going into my next shows, I was kind of thinking like, oh, that was like a fluke. Like, I don't know how I'll do it the next one and things like that.
But was because at that point, I think like this is something that I've been talking to a lot of like first timers about lately is, you know, like when you go into your first show and your first season, I think you kind of have to be very content with like the process and simply just getting there in the first place. And then if you come away and you get a good result, it's kind of like just an added bonus. But I think it's like you can never really go in and like expect anything because you never know what you're going to look like when you get on those stage. And I think that even for you, when you clearly had like such an amazing physique, but you still never went in and were like expecting like, I'm going to go in and win this first show or anything like that. You're just there to kind of enjoy the
experience. Just pleased I got there. Yeah. Like, honestly, because prep is an achievement in itself, isn't it? Like to get through a prep, like those years ago when I was like, no way I could ever do that. Like, I love food too much. Like, I wouldn't be able to get on stage. Like, so yeah, I was just pleased to be there. And then that was just a bit.
It was immense because I remember seeing the pictures and somebody's story because we weren't at the Southern show. I think we were at a BNBF show or something, and I remember somebody posting. I was like, "Holy crap! Like, who's that girl one figure?" And then I obviously realized that you'd also been at the Posing with Hannah seminar.
Oh yeah,
earlier that year.
Oh yeah, I'd seen you doing your talk, hadn't you?
And I was like,
I was a bit away with the fairies
at
that.
Yeah, I was like, there's Abi, and yeah, it all kind of like clicked together. But no, it was epic to see that. And then I did see you at the PCA Midlands.
Yeah.
When you were, and that was, I was so excited for that show because I'd obviously seen pictures of you. I was like, I need to see Abi in person. I need to see what she looks like. And I was really, really blown away by what I saw at the PCA as well, because especially you get to hit more muscular shots with PCA, which is pretty cool.
I know, I do like that. Yeah,
so,
I do wish that UKDFA I could do like the physique poses.
Well, maybe you can do physique one day because I've definitely got the muscularity for it.
A bit leaner, wouldn't I? Yeah.
But you've got it all there. But it was epic to see you then at PCA, and you obviously took the overall there, which
that was such a good show. I really enjoyed that show. Like, I love all the 60-second pose down, and then you're like running on the stage, and then you're doing all your poses. It was so fun.
It is such a fun experience. PCA, obviously the shows are so well run as well, and it's why like I always try to encourage people to compete with PCA, even if they've not thought about it, because I think every single person I ever speak to that competes with PCA always says they just have the best time, and I think that's so important, because that's kind of like what you want to enjoy on show day when you've worked so hard, is like actually enjoy being on stage and enjoy having a good time. Because I think it gets definitely like lost sometimes if people kind of
In the
get
seriousness, like,
yeah
yeah.
yeah
I wasn't even going to do PCA though. Like, even though I'd been to PCA shows and thought they were amazing, I just really didn't want to do the routine. So I'd said to
okay
Dan, like, I'll just do the natty shows. Like, I'm not really fussed to do PCA. And he was like, I really think you do pretty, like, you do all right in PCA, tone figure. Like, have a think about it. Like, he's like, literally just put a few poses together. You don't need to think about it too much, the routine. So then, yeah, he managed to persuade me to do PCA. But, and I'm really glad I did do it, because it was good fun.
and you came away with the overall, so it was
And I
like,
got a sword, so I was pleased with that.
how did you end up putting together did you do it yourself in the end, your routine?
Yeah, I just did it like a couple of weeks before. I didn't really put too much thought. I just did a few of my favorite poses to each side and went it round in a circle.
It doesn't, the thing is though, it doesn't need to be too much. Like I think
Yeah,
if you really enjoy like choreography and dancing, like absolutely have a great time.
yeah.
I would be exactly like you. I would be like, I'll hit a few poses, I'll get on
Dan
and
was
off.
just like, just treat it as like they're just like it's a photography, like a chance for them to take some nice photos of you, like just hold your poses.
Yeah.
So that, like you said, and it's not actually judged, it's more
No,
for
it's
the
not.
audience, like,
Exactly.
and
It's
like
the
there's girls
audience
that
and
can do
it's for you.
flips and stuff, like
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
can entertain the audience, and I'll just go around in a circle.
Well, the physique speaks for itself anyway, so
Oh,
that's
thanks.
kind of the most important thing. But I'm assuming you obviously came away from that specific show as well with a bit more confidence as well, because you've come off the back of two very, very successful shows. At at any point here now, because like you say, you from a young age you did have that competitive edge in you. Did you start to, at any point, even though it's still your first season, were you kind of like, you know what, like I'm actually quite good at this. I could, set some goals with this moving forwards.
I still don't think I still thought I was like, well, yeah, I've won the regionals, but like I
Mm.
still like there's no chance I'll win like the nationals or like the British. Like, no, I honestly was just happy to be going to the finals. I didn't really have any expectation of myself. Obviously, I probably thought like, oh, I would love to come like top three, but I
Yeah.
never thought I could win like the finals, or I didn't win the PCA finals, but no, I did. I still didn't really have that confidence, to be honest.
Do you think that in a way though, like that maybe helped you to not kind of start putting pressure on yourself? Because I definitely see it in a lot of people where say like they win a regional and then suddenly it's like they feel pressured, like, okay, I've got to step up now because people are expecting me to win, sort of thing. Did that actually help you because you didn't kind of put too much pressure on yourself going into the show days?
Yeah, like all I was thinking about was I just want to look a bit better than the regionals. Like that was kind of my main thought process. Um, yeah, I definitely think if you're thinking, I need to win this, then you're just going to be, disappointed probably, aren't you? Like, because I think even getting to the finals is an achievement, because like the
Yes.
standard has been really good as well. Like all PCA regionals and UKDFBA, like I think the standard's really good for figure. So
Yeah, it
I
was
was
a
just,
really,
yeah.
really, really good standard
That
in figure this year.
finals lineup was amazing. I honestly, and especially when I was on stage, like you were there, like, so when they do the call outs, they called me to the middle first, but then they like
Yeah.
budged me to the side. I was so confused. I was like, oh God, I was like, I must have messed up all my posing. They think they're putting me back to the back of the line. Like,
It was a really, really like tough lineup, but
mm,
they made so many call outs because they like,
yeah,
like usually you kind of know roughly what's going on, but like they called you in the middle, pulled you out. They pulled someone else in the middle, pulled them out, pulled someone, and it was like I was even watching it, and
you're
usually
like, what's gonna
yeah,
happen?
like usually I have a pretty good idea of what's going on, and I was like, I don't know. I was like, they could, but the top three, I was like, they could flip flop that. I was like, I don't know who's going to win. Because the thing with figure as well is it's like, it's, it's subjective in a sense, but it's like you all had very different looks as well. I mean, you in the end you ticked kind of like all the boxes that were needed to take the first win. But it was like, it's sometimes you never know where it's going to go. It's so different to like
Yeah,
bodybuilding, where it's like bodybuilding is like most muscle, like leanest condition, best
like a bit
balance,
more
win.
objective. Like, yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Whereas
Like,
figure is more about like shape and yeah.
yeah,
Because I mean, all the girls looked amazing, but the girl who like Zena's like different to me, as in she's got like really good like legs, like way better quads than me. Like she has that X kind of frame in that sense. And the girl who came second, she was insane. She was like shredded and massive. Like I remember seeing her pumping up and I thought, well, she's thrashing us all, to be honest. Like she was amazing. But then she's gone on and got her like pro card in physique, I think.
Yeah, she
yeah.
did. Which again, it like shows how like sometimes the classes as females, it's like you never really know where you're going to be because you can kind of cross between the two. And you see that all the time where sometimes it's a bit confusing, but someone can do well in figure and then it's like they also then come down maybe a bit leaner and then they do really well in physique, or it like other way round. And it's just like you kind of at the end of the day, you go in and like you said, in a show like that when the lineups are so good, you never know where it's going to go. You can't predict if you're going to win or if you're not going to win, because it is always subjective regardless. So as long as you go and you like have a good time, you're always going to get a good outcome. But I do recall you almost like being like slightly shocked when you won that title on the day.
I was genuinely convinced. I did not think I'd placed because they'd moved me so quickly, and I was like, oh right. And I was just like racking my brains. I was like, oh, my posing must have been way off, because I did know that I was like shaking in my poses. I was like, I couldn't hold them. I think I hadn't, like coming to the end, like you haven't got the energy to practice the posing, have you?
yeah, you're just dead by that point. But it was obviously an epic outcome, and one that got you the invitation to go to the Universe as well. What was that experience like, going on obviously like an international trip like that with like a team like the UKDFBA?
Well, because it was the UKDFBA finals that weekend, and then it was the PCA finals the following weekend, and then it was Romania was the weekend after. So obviously I'd already planned all my PCA finals. So I was thinking, is that wise? Like a third peak week? Like, so I messaged Dan, like, what do you think? And he was like, well, you're here now. Like, you're in shape. Like, and UKDFBA, the opportunity is so cool. Like they paid for like they paid for your flights, they paid for your part of your accommodation and your entry fees. So it was kind of like, come on then, like that's so nice of them to offer me that. Like I might as well do it. So that was super exciting. And then obviously got all like met all the team, and then we got our like Team UK merch. I love that. So I like wear that proudly in the gym now. Like Team UK. That was so fun. But the show, I was on stage at about 8:15 in the morning. I didn't enjoy the day because I was up at about, Dan was like, right, you need to have your first meal at 3:30. I was like, 3:30? And I hadn't managed to sleep the night before because there'd been like a busker outside our apartment.
Oh God.
So I'd not really fallen asleep. And then I pushed it to 4. I was like, come on, I'll do 4. So I woke up at 4 to have my porridge and barely slept, and had my second coat of tan at 5:30 in the morning at the venue. And then you're waiting around obviously to go on stage, and obviously like your bowels are out of sync because you've not slept, and like it just wasn't really going. I just didn't really feel my best that morning. I was like, it's very early to be getting on stage and be ready.
And it was just the third show consecutively.
And I'd kind of like said to I'm like, oh, finally, I am not that finally finishing, but like I was ready to finish. Come like the PCA finals, I was like, right, I'm done now. I'm ready to eat a bit more and have a bit more energy. But
that was then your like 5th show as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was my 5th show. Yeah, so is that quite a lot to do in a season? Yeah, I don't know.
I would say so. Yeah, I think like anywhere from like 4 to 5 shows is definitely like a lot of shows, because it's like the time duration of it, and then it's also just, especially for you there, like the multiple like peak weeks, and also the travel, because it's not just like doing 3 back-to-back peaks in the UK, it's doing 3 back-to-back peaks and also traveling to Romania and like getting involved in all of that, which is like even more not like stress and like things to handle. But how did you guys actually manage those back-to-back peaks as well? Because that's always something that a lot of people are interested in, is how you either maintain a look or improve a look over 3 weeks when you've got shows to peak for as well.
Yeah, because so I did the UKDFBA finals, and then he kind of said, right, we can push for a bit more condition at PCA, but obviously you've only got a week. So we did keep you on low days again for a good few days, and then like high days, but extra high days for a couple of days before. But then for the Romania one, he kept me on low until after my flight, because he was just worried that I might hold some water or something.
Yeah.
So then when I got to Romania, I got really high food actually, because he was like, you're looking really flat. And so it was quite nice actually. The 2 days of like loading up, I was like, oh, this is actually great, all the oats. But yeah, I think I was just running on adrenaline come Romania, like I didn't feel particularly like, I don't know, I was just excited to be in Romania at that point. But then after Romania, I was like, okay, I am very tired and I'm ready to finish. Like,
I think it's such a cool experience to be able to do like an international show and to obviously see what you're like against other athletes from different countries and things like that as well. But
yeah,
it's
I thought, what did you think of like what the INBA want versus what the UKDFBA? I thought it was slightly different what they were going for.
Yeah, so this is the thing is like first and foremost, I think that the UK standard of natural bodybuilding is honestly some of the best standard that I've seen. Other than maybe like in Germany, so like with the like the ANBF is very good in Austria. And they also do like the Evo Classic, which I think is in Germany as well. Like that's also a very, very good show. So they have really good standard. But with like the INBA, especially, and even with WNBF, like the best standard I've ever seen has been in the UK. Because I've been to Europeans, I've been to Worlds, I've been to the US, and like we have such an incredible standard of natural bodybuilders, like honestly. And then the thing as well is that when you go to different governing bodies in different countries, they have a different idea of what they think fits the class, especially when it comes to like figure and physique and things like that.
When it is a bit more like based on what they think.
And you see that a lot, especially with figure. I mean, like as an example, somebody like Grace Jones, who she went to the Europeans like last year, so like the equivalent of the universe, and she didn't place, or she came fourth, I think. And then she went to the Natural Olympia, and then she came higher at the Natural Olympia because of what the judges were just looking for.
Yeah, but you'd think the Natural Olympia, there'd be more people there. And
yeah, so it's like, from my opinion, I think that if you place well in the UK, like that trumps anything else. Like that is such an incredible achievement to be able to kind of take away from that. So I think that especially if you go to an international show as like a figure athlete or a bikini athlete or men's physique or whatever it is, where there's a bit more subjectivity, you kind of have to appreciate that there's going to be some variety in the judging, and people are going to have different opinions, because especially at that show, like the top three was such an interesting top three, because there was like you, who was definitely, you were on like a much more like muscular side. The woman who won was much smaller than you were in terms of muscularity, but maybe more balanced. And then the girl who came second was very, very lean. So it was like there was just such a
range of so and I guess it just depends what you have a preference for.
Exactly. So I think that you go into those shows with like, okay, I'm kind of here for the experience, to see what it's like to have another show, but you kind of take the result as, just what it is, but it's not kind of like everything, which I think
that was more about the experience, I think, than the actual maybe actual show and placing.
Exactly.
Like I definitely I was happier with my win at the UKDFBA.
Definitely.
Because like you said, the standard was just unreal. And I was just, so that to me was probably my favorite one. Definitely.
Exactly. And like at that point you were just kind of, you were ready to hang up the heels.
Yeah.
I remember seeing you that morning. You were like, yeah, I'm on stage soon. I'm ready to go. It's like, yeah, I bet. It's like 8:30 in the morning.
There was like nobody watching either, because it was so flipping early in the morning. So it wasn't really the best experience.
I know, but at least you kind of like had that, and you can then know maybe like how you want to manage like future seasons and what you want to do with your competitive goals, which is definitely important, because you never know until you ultimately try, and then you can always take something away from it, whether it be positive or negative as well. So when you obviously then came away from that show being your last show, did you guys actually spend a little bit of time in like Romania afterwards, or did you go back home? Like, how did you approach that initial kind of post-show period for you?
We had a couple of days in Bucharest, exploring and doing a little bit of sightseeing, went to the park and stuff. So that was quite nice. But I had we booked a holiday to Greece, all inclusive, like a while ago. Like I think it was like before the qualifiers, because I wasn't sure that I'd get to finals, but I was like, I'll book it just after finals. So like in my head, it was like 2 weeks after the PCA Finals. So I thought, I know they say don't book a holiday, but I thought, well, I deserve a holiday. So,
I want a
so
holiday.
I literally got back from Romania, and then like 3 days later we flew to Greece. So that post show, Dan was like, yeah, it's not ideal, but like just enjoy yourself, but don't go crazy, please.
Yeah.
So I didn't go crazy at all. Like I was just having like 3 meals a day, and then like loads of fruit, and I kept my activity at like 10k a day, to be fair. But then after that, then he gave me like my new meal plan and bumped everything right. Basically, it was like what I was eating before, but just a lot more of it.
Yeah.
And he bumped it up like a good amount. And I think that's to try and, well, obviously you feel hungry no matter what you eat, don't you, after a show? So it was just to try and manage that as best as he could, really. But it soon was up to, I mean, he did do meal planning free calories, but I worked it out and it was like already at 3,000 calories, like a few weeks post show.
Yeah.
But then it's only budged up a little bit. And then I did finish with Dan just before Christmas. Okay. So he like left me on this much food. So just do my own thing now. But I finally feel what my 3 months post show, like that my hunger hormones are kind of leveled out now. Yeah. And I don't want to just keep eating when I eat. But I didn't have any like, you know, you hear like horror stories, don't you, about like binging episodes and stuff. Like, obviously, I did make the mistake of having a few sweet treats that I'd seen online, and I bought them and they were like in my fridge. So when I got back from Romania, I did have like quite a few. And that's probably not the best thing to do. Like, if I did a prep in the future, I wouldn't have like, oh yeah, and I bought like a big bag of pick and mix that I'd seen. I had been missing pick and mix, to be fair. But because I'm so hungry, obviously I ate a lot faster than normal. So yeah, definitely I wouldn't do that if you're first time competitor. Don't have loads of sweet treats ready for you after your show. Maybe just one.
But like you like you say, you like learn from that, and you like are like, oh, okay. Because I think that's always the most important thing, is if anything ever like not necessarily goes wrong, but if you like manage, like you feel like you've overeaten or you didn't actually enjoy something that you've eaten or whatever it is, it's like all you have to do is then just like reflect on it and go, okay, did I actually enjoy that? Yeah. Did I actually feel good for doing that? And how can I just manage that better moving forwards? Because, you know, no one expects you to manage things like perfectly post-show, because it's also like not your fault, because hormonally, like you say, your hunger hormones are not regulated in the way that they usually are. So your ability to feel your normal appetite and also feel satiated, it takes time for that to kind of level out. But I think as long as you kind of give yourself that time, you give yourself that patience to figure it out, then that's the most important thing. So it doesn't come back straight away. You're not just going to have like a week or two of eating like higher food. It doesn't matter how high your food is, you know, it takes time to level out, because you've been in a deficit for like 6 months. So, you know,
I don't know how these, like, obviously I say that like 3 months, like it's taken for like appetite and all stuff to be okay. But it's like I've still not got my cycle back. Like, it's not a healthy thing that I've done to my body, really, is it? And I think when people are competing year on year, I just think how like their body mustn't be happy with them, because it's not actually that good for you. Like, you need to have time to recover. Like, because I was thinking about like if I'd compete again, obviously I'm hoping my cycle comes back soon. But it would have to be like I'd want it there consistently for like a good year, you know, before I even thought about it again.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's the huge reason why, you know, I think it's the same for all athletes, but especially as a natural athlete, you know, doing back-to-back seasons is a huge risk. And I think I've probably met like on like I could count it on like one hand the amount of females that I've met who don't suffer a huge amount of like hormonal irregulation or like lose their cycle during prep. And that's just genetics. Like that is just something that like some people don't have that issue no matter how lean they get. And it's got nothing to do with how you manage your prep or how you manage your off season. Like you could do it all perfectly, and it's like different people just have different set points as to when their cycles are going to be there. But that's why you've got to map your seasons out so carefully and definitely give yourself that time, because no matter how well you manage it, it does take a toll on your health. And you have to kind of be careful with that, because you see people going, oh, I'm ready to go, I'm going to go again next year, and then 6 months down the line they're like, yep, I am
Bonnie
not
wasn't ready for that.
I am not ready to go
Yeah,
prepping again. I will take my sweet time to recover. But you just give yourself like more time, and I promise like all those things will definitely settle more. But it's good that you've kind of got that awareness for yourself as to, you're not in a rush to do anything
no.
again anytime soon.
Because Dan was like, don't even try and diet until like at least like June. Like give yourself that long because your body just won't respond.
Yeah.
Like there's no point. He's like, if you do put on too much weight, like it's fine. Like you can lose it, but
Mm.
don't try and diet yet. Like just try and just hold out for a bit. So because my weight's now come up to what it was before, so I'm now back up to 66.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know if that's a decent amount. That's what 8 kilos back on now in
No, it's
3 months. Yeah. So I don't know what I'm going to push for because obviously I'm doing it on my own. And it was quite nice when Dan would just be like, right, we're up on your food now. And he would tell me when I'm ready to do that. So maybe if you're listening, Dan, I may be coming back.
Well,
But yeah, I can do it on my own.
it's never a bad thing to like need a little bit of guidance, like even if it's just like, because you know how to manage most things yourself, but even if you just need, okay, do I keep pushing here or do
Yeah.
I run a diet? NBW is great for that if anyone's interested. We do
Yeah, I'm a member of NBW. I
um,
need to start logging on there.
you should do a log. I'd love to follow your log, see what you're up to. But yeah, you'll definitely kind of like find your feet with that a lot more as kind of time goes on. But have you actually set any kind of goals for yourself in terms of coming away from the stage? Did you decide, okay, I do want to compete again and I have these goals? And are you trying to set any kind of goals to improve in the off season, or is it more so just kind of getting yourself back to kind of regularity post prep?
So I got feedback from the PCA shows, and they kind of said um, that one area I can improve on is like my quads. So like my yeah. So I said to Dan, he gave me a new training program with a bit more volume on legs, on quads. So I just love training upper body. So I am trying to work on improving my hamstrings, my quads a bit more. I've got a few strength goals as well. So like with like RDLs, leg press, and obviously strength goals for like some upper body movements as well. Because I think that's important, isn't it? Post prep, like because I don't really look at myself anymore, like because it's your view of yourself does kind of skew a bit, doesn't it? When you've done a prep, like now I have to, like Alice will tell me like you can't talk to yourself like that, like you're not fat, and I'm like I kind of feel like I am. So it's kind of taking the focus off that and putting it onto like building the numbers in the gym again. So definitely want to improve my hamstring squads and just generally get stronger over most movements.
Yeah, definitely. Like setting those goals is so important that are not like physique related. And
Yeah.
just like you said there, like the internal dialogue that you create for yourself is so important, because so many people get into that like habit in off season or as they come away from the prep and they're like, oh, well, I'm just fat now. And even if you say it like nonchalantly, like casually, like it still kind of embeds like in your brain that you're kind of creating more of like a negative association with like the direction that you're going in. And I think that, more often like focusing on like, okay, I feel good, I feel strong, like I'm starting to feel healthier, like, and focusing on things like that is definitely important, because you see your physique go in a very different direction. And I think especially like all athletes, but especially as a natural athlete, you almost feel smaller and you feel less like a bodybuilder, and it's
Yeah.
and you feel weird and you're like, I feel really small, and it's like strange.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, isn't it? The only
Yeah.
time I feel, well, you feel like massive when you get a pump on in the gym, but other than that, it's like I just look very, very average.
You appreciate it for the goal, and I think that like having then reflection on some of the cons that come with prep, like even you just mentioned there with like the energy at the end and then losing your cycle, it's like you remember why being where you're at now is
Yeah.
ultimately so important. But for you with like getting back on stage, is that something that you're just going to take kind of year by year and see where you want to go? Or have you had anything kind of like in your head at the moment as to when you might want to make a return?
I haven't got anything planned. It definitely obviously would not be 20 24, like this is far too soon. And then maybe I would see how I feel in 2025. But again, I'd have to really feel like I'm in a good situation, like life wise, and with good like body image, like good relationship with food still. So maybe 2025. And I don't know, I was watching the WNBF Worlds and I thought the standard there was absolutely insane, for like the pro figure and pro physique and stuff. So I was kind of like, maybe I should try a WNBF show. I don't know.
I would quite like to see that. I think it's always nice to see you do different feds and try different things, because there are a lot of different opportunities. Like it's kind of like a pro and con, I suppose, of like natural federations, is that there's so many of them. But that's kind of a nice thing, because there's different like avenues for you to go down and try. And especially like WNBF Worlds is definitely a huge event, and it would be pretty cool to see you kind of compete in a field like that.
Yeah, and I've never done BNBF as well, and that always looks good. Like from the photos, I'm like, oh, they do really good. Like the lighting looks really good, and so maybe I'd just try a few more different natural federations. And I really enjoyed doing UK DFBA, but I'd be scared I wouldn't win again. So maybe I'd just leave that one. You know, I've won that once, so
just chase down other titles and get them all. That's the goal. But no, I look forward to seeing that, obviously, whenever that happens. But even still, like, just seeing you hopefully have like a good off season and phase ahead of just kind of like growing and having fun away from prep will be cool to see, for sure. But I want to say like a huge thank you for coming on today, because it's been really, really nice to just chat through the whole process with you and just get to like know you a little bit more, obviously, as an athlete and as an individual, because I think that's kind of the whole point of the podcast, is putting a little bit more behind, you know, the physique that we see on stage, because there is a lot more to it. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing a bit more of your story.
Yeah, no worries at all. Thank you so much for inviting me. I was very flattered.
Oh no, you're very welcome. Do you want to let people know where they can find you on Instagram?
Yeah, my name on Instagram, sorry I don't post very much, is just literally Abi Kerr. So ABI and KERR. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, everyone go find Abi on Instagram. I'll make sure to link her page below. And yeah, just a huge thank you to everybody for watching or listening to this week's episode. As always, if you have enjoyed the episode, please make sure to like, subscribe, follow, rate, and definitely share and tag us on your story if you do listen to the episode. It's nice to know if you are listening and enjoying. So yeah, thank you so much, everyone. And I will be back with another episode next week.